We've all heard in our lives at some point or the other that human heart produces a dhak-dhak kind of sound. But if you ask a biology student, it's never a dhak-dhak sound that's produced, rather it's a lub-dub sound that's produced, one after the other, synchronously, lub-dub, followed by a pause, then again lub-dub. This one lub-dub is called as one heartbeat. So one heartbeat includes two sounds, the lub sound and the dub sound. Basically, there are a number of events that occur in a sequential manner in the human heart, and these events lead to the production or the generation of this lub-dub sound. So basically, the sequence of events that are responsible for the generation of the heartbeat, these events are what are called as cardiac cycle. Why the term cycle? Because the events are occurring in a cyclic manner, one after the other. Talking about the anatomy of the human heart consists of 4 chambers. The upper 2 chambers, they are called as atria, and the lower 2 chambers, they are called as ventricles. Let's consider that this square shaped structure, this is our human heart. It consists of 4 main chambers. The upper 2, they are called as atria, and the lower 2, they are called as ventricles. On the left side, we have left atria, LA, and the left ventricle, LV. On the right side, we have right atria and right ventricle. Also, on the inner wall of this right atria, there lies a small fragment of a tissue. We call that fragment as pacemaker or the sinoatrial node. Now the entire cardiac cycle begins right from the lungs when we start inhaling the oxygen. We inhale the oxygen from the nose, the oxygen reaches our lungs, and inside the lungs there is blood. This oxygen mixes with the blood, and the blood carrying the oxygen along is called as oxygenated blood. This oxygenated blood is picked up from the lungs by a pulmonary vein, and it is carried straight to the left atria. From left atria, this oxygenated blood is poured in the left ventricle. And from this left ventricle, this oxygenated blood enters into the great artery called as aorta or the systemic aorta. There is one important fact that needs to be remembered over here is that in between the left atria and the left ventricle, there lies a door. You can consider the left atria is one room and the left ventricle is another room. In between the two rooms, there is a door for the entry and the exit into any of the rooms. This door or this valve is called as bicuspid valve. Fine. Also, the aorta or the systemic aorta, at its opening, it also has got another valve. This valve is called as semilunar valve. Okay. Now this oxygenated blood from the from the systemic aorta is straight carried to the body organs. Inside the body organs, there is a continuous process of respiration occurring. What's respiration? Oxygen is being utilized by the body cells for the breakdown of glucose to release energy along with carbon dioxide as a byproduct. This is glucose. It mixes up with the oxygen that is brought here by the blood. Glucose plus oxygen, it gives carbon dioxide plus water plus energy. Now we know that inside the body organs, the oxygen is being consumed. And what is being produced? There is carbon dioxide that is being produced. This carbon dioxide again mixes with the blood, and this blood containing carbon dioxide or this blood that is devoid of oxygen, we call this blood as a deoxygenated blood. Now the deoxygenated blood that is produced in the body organs, that is picked up by the superior and the inferior vena cava. It's a large vein, and they carry this deoxygenated blood straight to the right atria. From right atria, the blood enters the right ventricle, and from right ventricle, where will the deoxygenated blood go? It will enter into the large artery called as the pulmonary artery. Again, you can remember over here, the opening of this artery is guarded by a valve, by a door called as semilunar valve. and the right atria, right ventricle, they are also separated by a door called as tricuspid valve. Fine. We can remember that heart basically has two main valves. On the left side we have bicuspid valve, on the right side we have the tricuspid valve. Second, the two major arteries, that is the aorta, they have semilunar valves. Also the pulmonary artery, it also has semilunar valves. Fine. Now this deoxygenated blood from the right ventricle is supplied straight to the lungs by the help of pulmonary artery. Inside the lungs what happens is, again there is exchange of gases. Carbon dioxide is exhaled out and the oxygen is inhaled into the body. Fine. This is the basic mechanism of the circulatory pathway that the humans follow. Now, where does the picture of cardiac cycle come from? Basically, the entire process begins as soon as the two atria are filled with blood. Left atria receives its blood from this pulmonary vein. Right atria receives blood from this superior and the inferior vena cava, and both get filled. Once both these atria are filled, there is a small electric current that is generated by the pacemaker. This current is produced from here and it reaches to the walls of atria. Fine. Once the current is supplied to the walls of atria, the atria undergo contraction. In the cardiac cycle, we call contraction as systole, and therefore the contraction of atria is called as atrial systole. What happens during the atrial systole is the atria would contract and the blood that is present in the two atria, that will be pumped down into the respective ventricles. This is atrial systole and it lasts for about 0.1 second, that is just a fraction of a second. Fine. This is the first event that occurs in the cardiac cycle, that is atrial systole. Second, now the blood is in the ventricles. Inside the ventricles, what will happen? The electric current that was generated in the pacemaker and that caused the contraction of the walls of atria has now reached up to the walls of the ventricles. In the walls of ventricles, they will again cause contraction and the ventricles now will begin to contract. This contraction of ventricles causes two main events in the cardiac cycle. First event, once the contraction is caused, a pressure is generated, and because of this pressure, these tricuspid and the bicuspid valves will close. Let's say this was the valve, the bicuspid valve. Once the pressure is generated in the lower ventricle, as a result of this pressure, the valve closes like this, upwards. Fine. Now the contraction is continuing. What will happen with the blood in the left and right ventricle? This blood has two paths. Either it can go back into the respective ventricles, which is not possible practically. Why? Because the doors are now closed. It will choose another path. From here, the oxygenated blood will be supplied to the systemic aorta, and from here the deoxygenated blood will be supplied to the pulmonary artery. Fine. Now this contraction of ventricles is called as a ventricular systole and it lasts for 0.3 seconds. But there is a very important event that occurs during the ventricular systole, that is the closure of the bicuspid and the tricuspid valve. And these bicuspid and tricuspid valves, once they close, they create the first sound of your heartbeat, that is the lub sound. Fine. So it is very frequently asked in your NEET examinations, the lub sound is produced during which event of the cardiac cycle? You need to remember that it is produced during the ventricular systole. Fine. Now, atria are done with their purpose of contraction. Ventricles are also done with the contraction. Now they would require a brief sigh of relief. They would require relaxation. This relaxation period of both the atria and both the ventricles, this is called as joint diastole. Fine. During joint diastole, what happens is both the atria and both the ventricles, which are now totally empty, they will relax. Okay, and what happens to the blood? The blood that is in the systemic aorta and the pulmonary artery, it is present in these large arteries, and it will consequently generate a pressure, because all fluids generate pressure. As a result of this pressure, the semilunar valves that are present at the opening of these two major arteries, they will close, and this closure of the semilunar valves generates another heart sound that is called as the dub sound. So two very important things you need to remember. One cardiac cycle consists of one heartbeat, and one heartbeat has got two sounds associated with it, the lub sound and the dub sound. Lub sound is produced during the ventricular systole, and the dub sound is produced during the joint diastole. This sound is caused because of the closure of bicuspid and tricuspid valves, and this sound is caused as a result of closure of the semilunar valves. Fine? This is the entire cardiac cycle. Here what you need to remember is the joint diastole occurs for about 0.4 seconds. So if we say that the cardiac cycle consists of atrial systole, ventricular systole and the joint systole, let's add these time figures and get a joint figure. It will be 0.1 seconds plus 0.1 plus 0.3 plus 0.4. You can add them and you will get 0.8 seconds. So you can remember that one heartbeat occurs in less than 1 second. One heartbeat occurs in 0.8 seconds. That means if one heartbeat occurs in 0.8 seconds, in 60 seconds, that is in 1 minute, how many heartbeats would arise? You can solve the equation as 0.8 multiplied by x is equal to 60. Solve the equation, you will get x is equal to 75. So from here you can remember that on an average a human heart beats between 72 to 75 times per minute. This is very important as far as your NEET examinations are considered. And this was all about the cardiac cycle. Thank you so much for staying connected.